Welcome back, guys, to Mr. Cursed. In today's episode, I'm sharing 7 true scary road trips deep into the Appalachian Mountains. These are real horror stories from people who drove on the scariest roads in the mountains. They saw things that still give them nightmares. But before we start, please think about subscribing. Don't forget to like the video and share it with your friends and family. I'd also love to hear where you're watching from. Thank you all for your support. It means a lot to me. Now let's start our scary journey into the dark roads of Appalachia. I was 24 when my grandmother got sick and needed surgery. She raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 8, so there was no way I wasn't going to be there for her. I work as an auto mechanic at a shop in Atlanta. Nothing fancy, but I know cars inside and out. Been working on them since I was old enough to hold a wrench. Grandma lived up in the mountains of North Carolina, about 4 hours from Atlanta if you take the interstate. But honestly, I hate driving on the highway when it's crowded, and I figured the mountain roads would be more peaceful. Give me time to think about everything, you know? The surgery was scheduled for the next morning, so I had plenty of time to get there. I left work early on a Thursday afternoon, threw some clothes in a bag, and started driving north. The first couple hours went fine. Nice scenery, not much traffic once I got off the main roads. I had my windows down, radio playing some classic rock, just enjoying the drive. The mountain air smells different up there, cleaner somehow. I was taking Highway 276 through some really pretty forest when my car started making this noise. Now, I'm a mechanic. I know every sound a car can make, and this wasn't normal. It wasn't the belt or the alternator or anything obvious like that. It was more like a grinding sound, but not from the brakes. Something deep in the engine that shouldn't be there. I pulled over at this little scenic overlook on Thunder Ridge to take a look. I popped the hood, but honestly I couldn't see anything wrong. Engine looked fine, oil was good, belts were tight. But the sound was still there when I started it back up. That's when this tow truck came around the bend. I mean, the timing was weird, right? I'm sitting there trying to figure out what's wrong with my car, and this guy just appears. Big blue tow truck, looked pretty new. The driver rolled down his window and smiled at me. "Having some trouble?" he asked. Real friendly voice. "Yeah, my engine's making this strange noise," I told him. "I'm a mechanic, but I can't figure out what it is." "Lucky timing then," he said. "I was just heading back to my shop. It's not far from here. I could tow you over. Take a look at it." I thought about it for a second. I really needed to get to my grandmother's house, but if the car broke down completely in the middle of nowhere, that wouldn't help anybody. And this guy seemed nice enough. "All right," I said. "How much for the tow?" "Don't worry about that right now," he said, getting out of the truck. "Let's just get you sorted out first." He was a big guy, probably in his 50s, wearing clean coveralls with some repair shop logo I didn't recognize. He hooked up my car real professional-like, knew what he was doing. I climbed into the passenger seat of his truck and we started driving. That's when things got a little weird. First thing I noticed was how quiet it was in the cab. Just the engine noise and this guy humming. He hummed the same tune over and over, some melody I didn't recognize. It was starting to get on my nerves, to be honest. I tried making conversation. "So, you have a shop around here?" I asked. "Oh yeah," he said, not looking at me. "Been in business a long time. Family operation. We specialize in classic restoration and permanent upgrades." "That's cool. What kind of training do you have? ASE certified?" That's when he started asking me questions. About where I went to school, where I learned to work on cars, what kind of training I had. Specific stuff. Really specific. Like he knew way more about my background than I'd told him. I never mentioned I was a mechanic when he first stopped, but somehow he knew. The air coming through the vents smelled weird too, like motor oil mixed with something sweet and organ. Ice. Made me a little nauseous. I tried adjusting the vents, but it didn't help. The radio was on low, playing these old advertisements for auto repair shops. Different ones from different decades, it sounded like. One was advertising 1967 Chevy tune-ups for $15. Then another one talking about computerized engine diagnostics. Then back to something that sounded like it was from the 1950s. I checked my phone to see how much longer we'd be driving, but the GPS was acting strange. It showed we were moving, but the estimated arrival time kept going up instead of down. We'd been driving for over an hour, but he'd said the shop wasn't far. "How much further?" I asked. "Just around the next bend," he said. Same thing he'd said 20 minutes ago. I looked in the side mirror and saw empty road behind us, but I could swear I heard other vehicles. Not just one or two, but like a whole convoy of cars and trucks. When I looked again, still nothing there. The temperature in the cab kept changing too. One minute I was sweating, the next minute I was cold enough to want a jacket. The driver didn't seem to notice, just kept humming that same tune. My phone battery died, which was weird because it had been fully charged when I left work. I plugged it into the charger, but nothing happened. The phone was just dead. Finally, we pulled into this repair shop tucked away in a mountain hollow. The building looked modern enough from the outside, but when we got closer, I could see the equipment through the open bay doors. Some of the lifts and tools looked brand new, but others looked like they were from decades ago, like really old stuff that you'd see in a museum. "Here we are," the driver said, getting out to unhook my car. That's when I saw the other mechanics. They came out of the shop to greet us, and every single one was wearing coveralls from a different time period. One guy had on clothes that looked like they were from the 1960s, another from the 1980s, one from maybe the 1950s. All different styles, but they were all clean and pressed like they were brand new. Oh, and here's the really weird part. They all knew my name. "Morgan," one of them called out. "Good to see you made it safely." I hadn't told the tow truck driver my name. I was sure of it. Another mechanic walked over to my car and started looking under the hood. "Timing chain's off by about 15 degrees, he said, "and the fuel mixture's running a little rich. Probably been that way for a couple months now." He was right. Those were both problems I'd been meaning to fix, but hadn't gotten around to. But there was no way he could tell that just by looking. Those aren't things you can see from outside the engine. "How did you know that?" I asked. The shop foreman came over. Older guy wearing coveralls that looked like they might have been from the 1970s. He had this really calm smile. "We know cars here," he said. "That's what we do. Let me show you around while the boys get started on your vehicle." The shop was huge inside, way bigger than it looked from outside. And there were dozens of cars in various stages of repair. Classic cars, modern cars, trucks, even some vehicles I didn't recognize. Every single one had modifications that shouldn't have been possible. I saw a 1965 Mustang with what looked like a modern fuel injection system, but not any brand I'd ever seen. A 2010 Honda Civic with an engine that had parts from at least 3 different decades of technology. Nothing made sense. "We improve vehicles here," the foreman explained, "using techniques from all eras, past, present, future." "Future?" I asked. He just smiled. I started looking more closely at the other mechanics. They were all working with incredible speed and coordination, like they'd been doing this exact same job for years. The guy in 1960s clothes was using tools that looked like they were from his era, while the guy next to him was using equipment that looked more advanced than anything I'd ever seen. "Look," I said to the foreman, "I appreciate the help, but I really need to get to my grandmother's house. She's having surgery tomorrow morning. How long is this going to take?" The foreman laughed. "Time works differently here," he said, "and don't worry about your grandmother. She's not going anywhere." The way he said it made my stomach drop, like he knew something about my grandmother that I didn't. That's when I started paying attention to the paperwork on his desk. Customer agreements, work orders, receipts. Some of them were yellowed with age. I could see dates going back decades, 1987, 1965, 1953, even earlier. And every single signature was from someone who'd brought their car in for simple repairs. Oil changes, brake work, tune-ups. "These customers," I said, pointing at the papers, "they all came here for basic stuff." "That's right," the foreman said, "just like you. But once a car enters our shop, we guarantee satisfaction, complete satisfaction." I looked around at the mechanics again, and suddenly I understood. They weren't employees, they were customers, people who'd brought their cars in for repairs and never left. "I want my keys back," I said. "Can't do that," the foreman said, still smiling. "Your car's already in the system. We've started the work." The mechanics stopped what they were doing and turned to look at me. They weren't threatening exactly, but there was something in their eyes, like they pitied me for not understanding. "You have skills we need," the foreman said. "Knowledge about modern vehicles that we can use, and your car will run forever here. Perfect condition, always." That's when I grabbed a tire iron from the workbench and swung it as hard as I could at the big window facing the parking lot. Glass went everywhere, but I didn't care. I climbed through and ran. I could hear them calling after me, but I didn't look back. I just ran toward what I hoped was the main road. My phone was still dead, so I couldn't call for help. I ran through the woods for what felt like hours, until I finally saw headlights. State trooper was driving by, probably heading home from his shift. I flagged him down, told him there was something wrong at the repair shop, that I needed help. He called it in, and a search party went back to look. They found my car on the side of Thunder Ridge where I'd originally broken down. Engine running perfectly, no problems at all. The sound that had been bothering me was completely gone. But there was no repair shop, no tow truck, no mechanics. The GPS showed no businesses in that area at all. The trooper thought maybe I'd had some kind of breakdown from stress about my grandmother's surgery. I didn't argue with him. What was I going to say? I made it to the hospital in a borrowed car from the police station, got there just in time to see my grandmother before her surgery. She came through it fine, made a full recovery. But I quit fixing cars that day, sold my tools, found a job doing something completely different. My grandmother understood when I told her about it. She just nodded and said some things are better left broken. I still drive that car sometimes. It runs perfectly, never makes any strange noises. But I've never taken it back to those mountains, and I never will. Looking back now, I think that shop is still out there somewhere. Still collecting mechanics, still improving cars with techniques that don't exist yet. Maybe it moves around, or maybe you can only find it when you really need help. Either way, I'm not taking any chances. These days, if my car makes a weird noise, I just live with it. I was 23 when I took the job delivering packages for one of those big shipping companies. Money was tight that year. My mom needed help with bills, and honestly, I needed to get out of the house more. So when they offered overtime during the Christmas season, I said yes to every shift they gave me. The pay was decent, and driving around all day beat sitting behind a desk somewhere. Most of my routes were normal suburban stuff. Apartment complexes, office buildings, the occasional house in a nice neighborhood. But right before Christmas week, they gave me something different. My supervisor handed me a route sheet for some addresses way out in the Kentucky mountains, places I'd never heard of. Moonshine Hollow, Copper Ridge, Devil's Backbone. The names alone should have been a warning, but overtime pay is overtime pay, right? I loaded up the truck that morning with maybe 30 packages, all going to the same general area. What struck me as odd was that most of them were addressed to people with the same last name, Patterson. Different first names, different addresses, but all Pattersons. I figured it was probably a big family reunion or something. Mountain families tend to stick together like that. The first few stops went fine. Small cabins tucked back in the woods, friendly people who were grateful to get their packages. One old woman even gave me homemade cookies. But as I got deeper into the mountains, following my GPS down narrower and narrower roads, things started feeling off. The roads weren't marked on any map I could find, but my GPS kept insisting I was going the right way. When I asked an old man sitting on his porch where the Patterson place was, he just pointed uphill and said, "Follow the smoke." He said it weird, though, like the smoke meant something more than just a chimney. I thanked him and kept driving, but his voice stuck with me. The road got so narrow my truck could barely fit between the trees. The packages in the back started sliding around despite how carefully I'd packed them that morning, and that's when I noticed how quiet it was. No birds, no insects, nothing. Just this bubbling sound coming from somewhere ahead of me, like water boiling but way too loud, like someone had a giant pot on the stove. The air started smelling weird too, sweet and sharp at the same time, like fruit mixed with gasoline and something medicinal. My truck's air conditioning couldn't seem to filter it out. I rolled down the windows thinking maybe fresh air would help, but it just made the smell stronger. My radio had been playing country music all morning, but now it was picking up nothing but banjo music played at the wrong speed. Too fast and frantic, like whoever was playing was in a hurry or scared. The music made me nervous, like it was trying to warn me about something. I checked my phone, full signal bars, but when I tried calling dispatch to ask about the route, the call wouldn't go through. It would ring once and then nothing. The GPS still showed my location, but there were no roads marked where I was driving. According to the map, I was driving through solid forest. The temperature kept rising as I climbed higher into the mountains. It was December, but it felt like summer in my truck. The windows were fogging up from humidity that shouldn't have been there, and the packages in the back. I started hearing sloshing sounds, like they contained liquid instead of whatever people had ordered online. That's when I saw the smoke. Not chimney smoke like I expected, but thick white clouds pouring out from between the trees. I followed it around a bend and found the source, some kind of metal contraption hidden back in the woods. It looked like something from a chemistry class, all tubes and burners and steam. Several men in overalls were tending to it, and when they saw my truck, they waved like they'd been expecting me. The lead man walked over before I'd even put the truck in park. He was maybe 50 Dunstan, with a gray beard and friendly eyes. "You must be the new delivery boy," he said. "Right on time." That stopped me cold. I'd never told anyone I was making deliveries. How did he know? Before I could ask, the men started unloading packages from my truck. They moved fast and knew exactly which ones they wanted. All the ones addressed to Patterson's. I jumped out and said, "Hey, those need signatures. I have to scan each package." They just laughed. "We've been getting deliveries here for 50 years, son. Don't worry about all that paperwork." They started opening the packages right in front of me. Inside wasn't regular stuff people order online. It was glass jars, copper tubing, thermometers, things I'd never seen before. Equipment that looked expensive and complicated. "This is theft," I said, reaching for my phone. "I'm calling my supervisor right now." The lead man pulled out a clipboard and showed it to me. "You work for us now, see? Your name right there on the paperwork." I looked at the clipboard. It had official company letterhead, delivery schedules, route assignments, and there at the bottom was my signature on a contract I'd never seen before. My handwriting, my name, everything. But I'd never signed anything like that in my life. "Mountain operation needs reliable transportation," the man explained. "You understand logistics, right? Getting the right materials to the right places at the right time." That's when I noticed the other workers coming out of the forest. They were all wearing the same uniform I had on, same patches, same name tags, same everything. Each one carried a delivery scanner and started talking to me about different route assignments, like we'd been working together for years. "Jerry takes the northern routes," one of them said. "Mike handles everything south of the ridge. You'll probably get the eastern section, lots of new customers but that way." I backed toward my truck. "I quit. Give me my packages and I'm leaving." The workers stepped closer, blocking my path. "Can't quit what you haven't started yet. Today's your first day on the job." "I've been working for this company for 2 years," I said. They looked confused. "2 years? Son, you just got here this morning. We watched you drive up." They honestly believed it, like time worked different for them or like they couldn't remember anything from before I showed up. It was the most unsettling thing I'd ever experienced. I grabbed my delivery scanner and threw it as hard as I could at their equipment. It hit something important because sparks started flying and steam shot everywhere. While they were trying to control the malfunction, I ran. I crashed through the woods, branches tearing at my uniform, heading downhill as fast as I could. Behind me, I could hear them shouting, but they seemed more concerned about their equipment than chasing me. The bubbling sound got quieter as I ran, and gradually I started hearing normal forest sounds again. Birds, insects, wind in the trees. I reached the main road just as the sun was setting. My delivery truck was sitting in the parking lot of our distribution center like nothing had happened. I ran inside and found my supervisor doing paperwork. "Riley," he said, looking surprised, "what are you doing here? You never left for deliveries today. Your truck's been parked outside all day." I tried to explain, but he showed me the computer records. According to the system, I'd clocked in that morning and immediately clocked back out. The packages I'd loaded were still sitting on the loading dock, exactly where I'd left them. The route to Moonshine Hollow wasn't even in our system. I quit that job the next Monday. Told them I was moving to a different career, something indoors. I work in a warehouse now in Vento, rye management. If I can't see all four walls of where I'm working, I don't stay. And I never, ever take jobs that involve driving into remote mountain areas. Sometimes I wonder about those. Other delivery drivers I saw in the woods, how long they'd been there, whether they'd found their way out, or if they were still making deliveries to places that don't exist on any map. I never went back to find out. Some questions are better left unanswered. To this day, whenever I see a delivery truck heading toward the mountains, I feel sorry for the driver. Because I know there are routes out there that aren't on any official schedule, places where time doesn't work right and people don't remember what happened yesterday. And once you make that delivery, you might not be coming back the same person who left. I still get mail from that shipping company sometimes. Recruitment letters, offers to return to driving routes. They always mention opportunities in rural Kentucky, good pay for mountain deliveries. I throw those letters away without reading them. Some jobs aren't worth the overtime pay, no matter how much they offer. I was 25 when I drove out to rural Virginia for what I thought would be my last shot at working in radio. I'd been unemployed for 6 months after the station in Richmond let me go, and honestly, I was getting pretty desperate. My savings were almost gone, and my parents kept asking when I was going to get a real job. This tiny mountain station called WMTN had posted an opening for a DJ, and even though the pay was terrible and the location was in the middle of nowhere, I figured it was better than nothing. The interview was scheduled for 2 p.m. on a Thursday. I left early that morning because the GPS showed it would take about 4 hours to get there, winding through some seriously remote mountain roads. I figured I'd take the scenic route, maybe listen to some music, practice my interview answers. You know how it is when you're nervous about a job. You run through all the questions they might ask, try to sound confident even when you're not. About an hour into the drive, I started messing with the radio to find something good to listen to. Most of the stations were either static or some preacher talking about the end times. But then I picked up this clear signal, and the DJ's voice sounded really familiar. I couldn't place it at first, but there was something about the way she talked that made me keep listening. She was playing all these songs that were on my personal playlist. Stuff I had on my phone that wasn't exactly mainstream radio material. Old college indie tracks, some obscure folk songs I'd discovered years ago. I thought it was weird, but honestly, it made me feel good about the station I was going to interview with. Maybe they had similar taste in music. Then the station manager's voice came on during a break. Deep, friendly voice that sounded like he'd been in radio forever. Well, folks, we've got a special day today. Casey Martinez is driving up from Richmond to join our team here at WMTN. Welcome, Casey. We've been expecting you. I nearly drove off the road. How the hell did they know I was listening? I was still 2 hours away from their broadcast area, at least according to the GPS. I checked my phone to see if maybe I was streaming their website or something, but no, I was picking them up on the regular FM dial. The female DJ came back on, and she started talking about college radio like she knew exactly what she was talking about. You know, folks, there's nothing quite like working at a college station. All those late nights in tiny studios playing music for maybe 12 people who are still awake. Casey here spent 3 years at VCU's station, WVCW. Did the midnight to 3 a.m. shift most nights. Played a lot of the same music we're spinning today. I felt this cold feeling in my stomach. They knew things about my background that I hadn't put on my resume. I mean, yeah, I'd worked at the college station, but that was just for fun. I never listed it as job experience because it wasn't paid work. How did they even know about it? The strangest part was the female DJ's voice. The more I listened, the more it sounded exactly like mine. Same inflection, same way of pausing between words. I started recording it on my phone, thinking maybe I was just imagining things, but when I played it back, it was like listening to myself talk. That's when I noticed something else weird. My car had gotten really quiet. I mean, completely silent except for the radio. I couldn't hear the engine running, couldn't hear the tires on the road, couldn't even hear the wind. It was like I was sitting in a soundproof booth, and the only thing coming through was these radio voices. I tried switching to other stations, but they were all static now. Every single one except WMTN, which was coming in crystal clear. The signal was actually get. Ting stronger the farther I drove, which made no sense at all. Usually, mountain radio stations fade out when you get too far away, but this was the opposite. Then the DJ started reading my thoughts. I'm not kidding. I would think something, and within a few seconds, she'd say it on the air. I thought about how weird this whole situation was, and she said, I know our listeners might be thinking this is a little strange, but sometimes the mountains play tricks on radio signals. I wondered if maybe I should turn around and go home, and she said, now don't anybody give up and turn around. We're all looking forward to meeting Casey today. I thought about my college girlfriend Sarah, who used to listen to my radio show, and the DJ said, this next song goes out to all the girlfriends who stayed up late listening to their boyfriends stumble through their first radio gigs. Sarah, this one's for you, honey. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the steering wheel. I tried to call someone, but my phone had no signal at all. 0 bars. But the radio was still coming through perfect, like it was being broadcast right into my car. The temperature inside my car started changing too. When the DJ gave weather updates, my car would get hot or cold to match exactly what she was saying. It's a beautiful 78 degrees here in the valley. And suddenly I was sweating. But it's getting a little chilly up on the ridges, dropping down to about 55. And I had to turn on the heat. Then they started playing commercials for businesses I had driven past hours ago. A diner I'd stopped at for coffee, a gas station where I'd filled up, even a little antique shop I'd just glanced at while driving by. Come on down to Miller's Antiques on Route 29. Casey Martinez just drove past and saw some beautiful old radios in the window. That's when I heard my own voice on the radio. The station ID came on. You're listening to WMTN 107.5 FM, Casey Martinez reporting from the heart of Virginia's mountains. But I wasn't reporting anything. I was just driving and listening and trying not to lose my mind. I finally reached the radio station around 1:45, 15 minutes early for my interview. The building looked exactly like the college radio studio where I'd worked back at VCU. Same brick exterior, same layout, even the same faded paint on the front door. I sat in my car for a few minutes, trying to figure out what was going on. A woman came out of the building and waved at me. Casey, right on time. I'm Janet. We talked on the phone. But I'd never talked to anyone named Janet. The person who'd called me about the interview was a man named Tom. I followed her inside, and the lobby looked like a perfect copy of my college station. Same furniture, same posters on the walls, same ugly carpet. Janet handed me a microphone, and when I looked at it, I saw the same serial number as the mic I'd used every night for 3 years in college. That's weird, I said. This looks exactly like the microphone I used to use. Janet smiled. We like to make our DJs feel at home. Tom is waiting for you in Studio A. Studio A was identical to the studio where I'd done my college show. Not similar, identical. Same mixing board, same CD players, same everything. On the walls were photos of me from college, pictures I didn't even remember being taken. My college radio ID badge was pinned to the bulletin board. Tom, the station manager, was sitting behind the desk. He was a big guy, maybe 50, with gray hair and kind eyes. Casey, welcome to WMTN. We've been preparing for you. Preparing for me? Well, sure. This job was created specifically for you. We've been monitoring your work since college, and we think you'd be perfect for what we have in mind. He showed me around the rest of the station. There were 5 different studios, and each one had someone working who looked exactly like me. Same face, same hair, same voice, but they were dressed differently and playing different kinds of music. In Studio B, there was another Casey doing country music. In Studio C, another Casey doing rock. Studio D had Casey doing news and talk. And Studio E had Casey doing classical music. They all looked up and waved when they saw me, like this was perfectly normal. What the hell is going on here? I asked Tom. He laughed. We're you, of course. Every version of DJ you could possibly become. We've been developing different personalities for different formats. Country Casey knows everything about your childhood in rural Virginia. Rock Casey remembers all your favorite bands from high school. News Casey has been studying current events from your perspective. Classical Casey has your music appreciation background from college. I could hear them all talking on the air, telling stories about my life that I'd never shared with anyone. Country Casey was talking about the time my grandfather taught me to fish. Rock Casey was discussing a concert I'd gone to in college. News Casey was reporting on events in my hometown. How do you know all this stuff about me? Tom opened up a filing cabinet full of voice samples. Hours and hours of recordings of me talking, from radio shows and phone calls and conversations I'd had in public places. We've been collecting these for years, every possible inflection, every way you might say something. We can create perfect versions of you for any format. The Casey in Studio A started broadcasting live while we were talking. She was discussing my drive up to the station, describing exactly what I'd been thinking during the trip. She's nervous, Studio A Casey said into the microphone. First day jitters, you know. But she's going to do great here, we all are. Tom handed me a contract. Every shift, every format, every demographic. You'll never have to worry about being unemployed again. We'll always have work for you here. I looked at the contract and realized what they wanted. They didn't want to hire me. They wanted to own me, make unlimited copies of me to run every possible type of radio program. Thank you. This is insane, I said. I'm leaving right now. Tom's smile never changed. Leave? But you just started your first shift. All the other Caseys started talking at once, their voices coming through the studio monitors. She's nervous. First day jitters, you know. She'll settle in. She'll love it here. We all do. We're all Casey, and Casey belongs here. I grabbed a microphone stand and started smashing the equipment in Studio A. The sound was horrible. Feedback and screeching and static all mixed together like every radio in the world was screaming at once. The other Caseys kept broadcasting like nothing was happening. Technical difficulties, folks. We'll be right back after these messages. I ran out of the building while alarms were going off and electronics were sparking. I got in my car and drove as fast as I could down those mountain roads, not stopping until I was back on the interstate. My radio played nothing but static for the next 100 miles. No stations at all, just white noise. When I got home, there was a voicemail on my phone from Tom. Thanks for coming in for the interview, Casey. Unfortunately, the position has been filled internally. We'll keep your information on file for future opportunities. The next day, my old college radio station called me. Casey, we need to talk to you about something. Someone's been using your voice to make illegal broadcasts. The FCC is asking questions. I never went back into radio. I work at the public library now, in the reference section. Books are quiet. They can't talk back or steal your voice or make copies of you to use however they want. Sometimes, late at night when I'm scanning through radio stations, I still hear my voice coming from different places, different formats, different times, but definitely me. I always turn it off right away. I still drive through those Virginia mountains sometimes, but I never turn on the radio when I do. And I sure as hell never listen to WMTN, even though I know it's still out there, probably still broadcasting with voices that sound exactly like mine. Looking back, I think they're still collecting voices, still making copies of people who are desperate enough for work to drive up into those mountains alone. If you ever get a job offer from a radio station you've never heard of, in a place you can't find on a map, maybe think twice about it. Some jobs aren't worth taking, no matter how bad you need the work. I was 23 when I got my first real job interview out of college. Fresh engineering degree, student loans piling up, and honestly, I was desperate. This construction company in rural Tennessee had called me back after I sent out like 50 applications, and they wanted to meet in person at their main office way up in the mountains. The pay was decent, and honestly, I couldn't afford to be picky. I needed this job. The interview was scheduled for 2 p.m. on a Thursday, and I'd mapped out the drive the night before. Google said it would take about 3 hours from my apartment in Nashville, but I wanted to get there early. Make a good impression, you know? So I left around 9 a.m., thinking I'd grab lunch somewhere and maybe drive around the area a bit before the meeting. Looking back now, I should have just taken the main highway and been happy to arrive on time. But I was young and anxious, and when I saw a sign for a mountain shortcut that would save me about 30 minutes, I took it. The road wound up through some seriously dense forest, the kind where the trees grow so thick you can barely see the sky. It was actually pretty nice at first, quiet, peaceful, better than sitting in traffic on the interstate. My phone still had signal, the GPS was working fine, and I was making good time. That's when I started seeing the construction signs. First, it was just one of those orange diamond warning signs that said, "Road work ahead." Normal stuff. Then another one, about a quarter-mile later, "Detour, follow orange cones." I figured it was just routine maintenance. Mountain roads always need work, right? Especially these older back roads that probably don't get much attention from the state. The orange cones started appearing along the shoulder, leading me down what looked like a side road. It was paved, at least, though narrower than the main road I'd been on. The trees pressed in, closer on both sides, creating this tunnel effect where everything felt dim and cool, even though it was a bright sunny day. I followed the cones for maybe a mile before I saw the work crew up ahead. There had to be at least 8 or 10 guys in hard hats and safety vests, setting up equipment around what looked like a pretty major construction site. They had barriers set up, some kind of heavy machinery, and that orange mesh fencing you always see around roadwork. One of them was directing traffic, well, just me actually, with one of those stop and slow signs. I rolled down my window as I pulled up. "Excuse me," I called out to the guy with the sign. "How long is this going to take? I've got a job interview in about an hour." The man walked over to my car. He was probably in his 50s, with graying hair under his hard hat and this really wide smile that seemed genuine enough. "Don't worry about timing, son," he said. His voice had that mountain accent, but not heavy. "We'll take good care of you." Something about the way he said it felt off. The smile was too wide, like he was forcing it, and his eyes didn't match the friendliness in his voice. But I was stressed about the interview and probably reading too much into things. "Is there another way around?" I asked. "I really can't be late for this." "No, sir. This is the only road through here now," he said, still with that stretched smile. "But like I said, don't worry about it. We're just doing some improvements." He waved me forward with his sign, and I drove slowly past the barriers into what was clearly an active construction zone. That's when I started noticing things that didn't quite add up. For one thing, the forest was completely silent except for this rhythmic hammering sound that seemed to be coming from everywhere at once. No birds, no insects, no wind in the trees, just that steady hammering that had this weird echo to it, like it was coming from underground rather than from any of the equipment I could see. The air smelled wrong too. It was this mix of fresh concrete and something organic and rotting, like when you find a dead animal that's been sitting in the heat for too long. I rolled my window back up and turned on the AC, but the smell seemed to seep in anyway. The construction equipment looked brand new, like showroom new, but when the workers operated it, it made sounds like much older machinery. Grinding, wheezing sounds that didn't match the modern excavators and compactors I was looking at. And the workers themselves moved with this perfect coordination that was unsettling to watch. They never spoke to each other, never stopped to drink water or take a break, just kept working in this synchronized rhythm. I sat in my car for a few minutes, watching them work and waiting for someone to wave me through. That's when I noticed my radio had started playing advertisements for construction companies. Not just one or two, but a constant stream of ads for different firms, and they all sounded like they were from different decades. The voices, the production quality, even the phone numbers. Some had only 4 digits, some had the old exchange names instead of area codes. I tried to change the station, but every channel was the same thing. Construction company ads from what sounded like the 1950s all the way up to maybe the early 2000s. My phone still showed full signal, but when I tried to call my girlfriend to let her know I might be running late, the call wouldn't connect. The text I tried to send just sat there with that little sending indicator spinning. And it was getting hot, like really hot. I'd been running the AC, but the temperature around the construction site had to be 20 degrees warmer than it had been just a few hundred yards back. I could see heat waves rising from the pavement, even though it was only about 70 degrees when I'd left Nashville that morning. The weirdest part, though, was the orange cones. Every time, I glanced in my rearview mirror, There seemed to be more of them stretching back the way I'd come. The line of cones was getting longer, extending farther and farther behind me, like they were multiplying while I wasn't looking directly at them. After about 10 minutes of sitting there, I got out of my car and walked over to the foreman, the guy who'd talked to me when I first pulled up. "Listen," I said. "I really need to get back to the main highway. When do you think I'll be able to get through?" He looked up from his clipboard and gave me that same too-wide smile. "Highway? Son, this is the only road now. We're improving it, making it safer for everyone." I looked back the way I'd come, and he was right. The road looked different, narrower somehow, and the pavement seemed older, more cracked. The orange cones stretched back farther than I could see, disappearing around bends that I didn't remember being there before. "I don't understand," I said. "I just came from the highway maybe 20 minutes ago." 20 minutes? He laughed, but it didn't sound amused. "Son, time works different when you're doing important work. Road work never ends, you know. Always something needs fixing. Always something needs improving." That's when the other workers started walking over toward us. Each one carried different tools, hammers, wrenches, surveying equipment, but they all wore identical safety gear. As they got closer, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. Their hard hats all had names and dates written on them in that same black marker handwriting. Jenkins, 1952, Martinez, 1978, Thompson, 2019, Sullivan, 1963, Peterson, 1994. Different names, different years, spanning more than 70 years. But they were all here, all working on the same crew, all looking like they were in their prime working years. "That's a nice car you got there," the foreman said, nodding toward my Honda. "Looks like it might need some work, though. Safety inspection, you know. Can't have unsafe vehicles on our road." Before I could protest, 3 of the workers had moved to my car and started examining it with their tools. They opened the hood, checked the tires, and began doing things I couldn't see clearly. Things that involved connecting their construction equipment to parts of my engine. "Hey," I said, walking quickly back toward my car. "I didn't ask for any inspection. I need to get to my interview." "Interview?" The foreman followed me, checking his clipboard again. "You're already hired, son. Welcome to the crew." He turned the clipboard around and showed me a work order with my name at the top. Taylor Kim, it said, with today's date. Below that were details about my engineering degree, my GPA, even my student loan amounts. Information I'd never given to anyone related to this construction company. The workers had done something to my car. The interior looked different. The steering wheel had been replaced with what looked like crane controls, and there were gauges and switches I didn't recognize. The radio was gone entirely, replaced with some kind of communication equipment that was crackling with voices speaking in that same measured, coordinated rhythm the workers used. "Been waiting for someone with your skills," one of the workers said without looking up from whatever he was doing to my dashboard. "Fresh blood, fresh ideas. The road work's been going on since the 50s, you know. We need someone who understands modern engineering." "How do you know about my degree?" I asked. But he just smiled, that same forced smile they all wore. The foreman pulled a hard hat from somewhere and held it out to me. It was yellow, like the others, and when I looked closer, I could see my name already printed on it in that same black marker. Taylor Kim, 2025. "This fits you perfect," he said, like it was made specifically for you years ago. The hat did fit perfectly when he placed it on my head. Too perfectly, like it had been measured and customized just for me. But that was impossible. I'd never been here before, never applied to work for whatever company this was. "Road construction is steady work," the foreman continued. "Permanent employment, good benefits. You'll never have to worry about finding another job." All the workers had stopped what they were doing and were staring at me now. Their expressions were identical. Not quite angry, but disappointed, like I was letting them down somehow. "I'm not taking this job," I said, pulling the hard hat off my head. "I have other plans. I have an interview." The silence stretched out for what felt like forever. Even the rhythmic hammering had stopped. The foreman sighed, a sound full of genuine sadness. "Plans change, son. he said quietly. Road work is steady employment, permanent employment. That's when I noticed all the workers had raised their tools. Not in a threatening way exactly, but like they were getting ready to use them. The man closest to me held a surveyor's rod like a spear. Another had a hammer that seemed way too heavy for normal construction work. A third was holding some kind of tool I didn't recognize, something that looked like it belonged in a much older era of road building. I realized they weren't just offering me a job. They weren't giving me a choice. I grabbed the surveyor's rod from the nearest worker. He seemed surprised enough that he just let me take it, and swung it in a wide arc to create some space between me and the rest of the crew. They moved back, but not quickly, more like they were disappointed in my reaction than actually threatened. Don't make this harder than it needs to be, the foreman called after me as I ran toward the tree line. You'll be back. They always come back eventually. I crashed through the forest, branches tearing at my clothes and face, following what I hoped was the sound of actual highway, traffic in the distance. Behind me, I could hear the workers calling my name, but their voices seemed to be coming from different directions, like they were surrounding me. The sun was setting by the time I finally stumbled out of the woods and onto what I recognized as the main highway I'd been on hours earlier. When I looked back, there was nothing but forest. No construction site, no equipment, no crew, just trees and the sound of wind. I called the Tennessee Department of Transportation the next day and described the location as best I could. They told me there had been no road work scheduled in that area for the past 20 years. No permits issued, no crews assigned. They'd never heard of the shortcut I described. I never made it to that job interview, obviously. Called and tried to reschedule, but the company said they had no record of ever contacting me. The phone number I had for them was disconnected. I ended up taking a job with a civil engineering firm in Nashville instead. Office work, designing roads and bridges on computers. I'm good at it, and the pay is decent. But I never do site visits anymore. Never go out to check on actual construction projects. When my coworkers ask why, I just tell them I prefer the design side of things. To this day, I take the interstate everywhere, even if it adds an hour to my drive, even if there's construction delays. I've never taken another mountain shortcut, and I never will. Sometimes when I'm working late and the office is quiet, I can still hear that rhythmic hammering. It's probably just the building settling, or maybe construction work somewhere in the city. But it always has that same weird echo, like it's coming from underground. And sometimes I wonder if they're still out there, working on that road, still waiting for fresh talent, still improving things, still wearing hard hats with names and dates spanning decades. I still have my engineering degree, and I'm good at my job, but I design roads for other people to build now. I stay in my office, work with my computers, and never go out to see the actual construction sites. It's better that way. I'm 26, and I fix traffic lights for the county. Not the most exciting job in the world, but I like solving problems. When signals work right, traffic flows smooth. When they don't, you get chaos. I've been doing this for about 3 years now, driving around in my service truck with all my testing equipment and spare parts. Most days, it's pretty routine stuff, replacing burnt-out bulbs, fixing timing issues, dealing with storm damage. The call came in around 2 p.m. on a Tuesday in October. Dispatch said we had signals malfunctioning up at Widow's Peak, causing dangerous backup on the mountain road. I'd never been to that intersection before, which was weird because I thought I knew all the signals in our coverage area. But the county's got a lot of back roads, and some of those mountain intersections only get attention when something goes wrong. I loaded up my truck with extra parts. You never know what you'll find on these older installations. The drive up to Widow's Peak took about an hour, winding through some pretty thick forest. The road got narrower as I climbed higher, and I started wondering why they'd need traffic signals way up here. Seemed like the kind of place where you might see maybe 10 cars a day. When I finally reached the intersection, I was surprised to find a repair crew already there. Their trucks were parked around the signal box, and I could see guys working on the equipment. The crew chief waved me over as soon as he spotted my county vehicle. "Perfect timing," he said. "We need someone with your expertise." I got out and looked around. It was definitely an unusual setup. The intersection had multiple traffic signals from what looked like different decades of technology. Some were modern LED units, Others were the old incandescent bulbs. Weird mix for one corner, but I'd seen stranger things in rural areas where they just add new equipment without removing the old stuff. "What company are you guys with?" I asked. "I don't recognize your trucks." The crew chief smiled. "Company, son, we're county maintenance. Been keeping this intersection running for decades." He showed me work orders going back to the 1960s. Same intersection, continuous repairs. Each crew member wore a badge from what looked like different eras of the county traffic department. Some of the badges were so old they were practically falling apart. That's when I started noticing things were a bit off. First thing, there was no traffic, none at all. You always hear cars on mountain roads, especially during the day. Engine noise echoes for miles up here. But it was completely quiet except for the sound of our work. The air smelled weird, too, like electrical burn mixed with something metallic and old. I pulled out my signal tester to check the power readings, and that's when things got really strange. The equipment was showing impossible voltages, like the lights were running on completely different electricity than what should be feeding them. "These readings don't make sense," I told the crew chief. "Don't they?" He looked at my tester with interest. "What exactly are you seeing?" I showed him the display. According to my equipment, the signals were pulling about 3 times more power than they should need, but somehow still operating normally. The timing sequences were all wrong too. Lights changing in patterns that didn't match any standard programming. One of the other technicians came over and started modifying my testing equipment. He attached some parts that looked like they were from the 1970s, but they fit perfectly and seemed to improve the readings. "There we go," he said. "Sometimes the newer equipment doesn't speak the same language as the older systems." I tried to radio back to county dispatch to report on the situation, but all I got were electronic beeps and what sounded like signal timing codes. The temperature around the intersection seemed to change whenever the lights cycled through their sequence. Cool when the red was showing, warmer during green phases. The electronic road signs were displaying messages I'd never programmed or authorized. Things like "Maintenance in progress, thank you Sam," and "Signal optimization, please stand by." How did it know my name? "How is that sign displaying my name?" I asked the crew chief. "Signals know their technicians," he said matter-of-factly. "They learn maintenance patterns over time. This intersection has been here a long time, Sam. It recognizes people who work on it." That should have been impossible. Traffic lights don't think. They're just timers and sensors and basic programming. But as I walked around the intersection, the lights started changing in response to my movements. When I thought about heading home for the day, one of the signals actually seemed to point in the direction of my house. "Traffic lights don't think," I said out loud. "They're just equipment." The crew chief smiled again. "Don't think? These signals coordinate traffic across the entire county. Look here." He showed me maps with signal networks that I'd never seen on any county plans. Lines connecting every intersection, showing traffic flow patterns that covered hundreds of miles. According to his diagrams, this intersection was some kind of central hub controlling the timing for dozens of other locations. The other technicians were talking about the signals with this intense professional pride, like they were conducting a symphony of traffic flow. They spoke about optimization and coordination like the lights were living things that needed care and attention. I decided it was time to check in with the office and head back. But when I tried to call county dispatch, something strange happened. The phone connected, but instead of hearing the usual dispatcher, I got an automated system. "Sam Park," the recording said in what sounded exactly like my own voice. "Permanent assignment confirmed. Reporting for extended duty at Widow's Peak intersection." I never said that, I told the crew chief. I didn't request any permanent assignment. He looked confused. "Permanent assignment? Sam, this is the most important intersection in the county. Of course you'd want to be stationed here." "Important? It's in the middle of nowhere. I haven't seen a single car use this road." The signals started flashing in synchronized patterns, all of them cycling through their sequences at the same time. It was like they were trying to communicate something. "Importance isn't measured by volume," one of the technicians said. "It's about coordination, control, making sure everything flows the way it should." I looked at my watch. It was getting late and my fuel gauge was reading empty even though my truck was still running fine. The whole situation was making me uncomfortable in a way I couldn't explain. "I need to get back," I said. "I have other intersections to service tomorrow." "Other intersections?" The crew chief looked genuinely puzzled. "Sam, this is your assignment now. This intersection requires a dedicated technician for optimal operation." "I don't understand. I work on dozens of intersections across the county. That's my job." The signals were flashing faster now, and I could swear I heard a low humming sound coming from the equipment. The road signs were cycling through messages. "Optimization in progress," and "Technician integration required," and "System efficiency improved." That's when I realized I needed to get out of there. Something was very wrong with this place, and these people, and especially these signals that seemed to know too much about me. I walked back to my truck, trying to act casual. The crew was still working, but I could feel them watching me. I got in, started the engine, and began backing away from the intersection. As soon as I did, all the signals went dark at once. The crew chief ran over to my window. "Sam, the system's failing. We need you here to maintain coordination." Instead of stopping, I hit the gas and headed down the mountain as fast as I safely could. In my rearview mirror, I could see the crew scrambling around their equipment, trying to get the lights working again. I didn't stop until I reached the county office. It was after midnight by the time I got there, but I found a supervisor and explained what had happened. Told him about the malfunctioning signals, the strange crew, all of it. He listened patiently, then pulled out a county map. "Widow's Peak?" he said, looking confused. "Sam, we don't maintain any signals up there. That road's been abandoned for years. Used to connect to an old logging operation, but there's nothing up there now." I showed him the work orders the crew chief had given me, but the supervisor said he'd never seen them before. The paperwork looked official, but apparently our department hadn't used those forms in decades. The next morning, I put in for a transfer. I work for the water department now, testing quality at treatment plants and reservoirs. It's completely different work, but I like it. Water just flows where physics tells it to. It doesn't learn patterns or try to coordinate with other systems. It doesn't know my name or display messages meant just for me. I still drive past the turn for Widow's Peak sometimes when I'm doing water quality checks in the mountains. I've never gone back up that road, and I never will. But sometimes, especially on overcast days, I swear I can see lights flashing through the trees, like signals trying to coordinate something, like they're still waiting for their dedicated technician to come back and help with the optimization. I don't work on traffic lights anymore, and I'm fine with that. Some systems are better left alone. I'm 24 and I own a small taco truck called Jamie's Tacos. It's not glamorous, honestly, but it pays the bills after college. I've been doing this for 2 years now, driving to weekend festivals and events around West Virginia and the surrounding states. The money's decent if you pick the right spots, and I actually enjoy meeting people and serving good food. My mom always said I was too trusting. Maybe she was right about that. So anyway, I got this invitation in my email about 3 weeks ago for something called the Serpent's Gap Mountain Festival. Never heard of it before, but the email looked legit enough. Professional layout, festival schedule, vendor requirements, the whole thing. What really caught my attention was the promised attendance numbers. They were talking about thousands of people over the weekend, way more than the usual small-town festivals I work. The location was up in the mountains of West Virginia, about 4 hours from where I live. The organizers said they specifically wanted food trucks, and the vendor fee was reasonable. Honestly, the whole thing seemed like exactly what I needed to make my rent for the next 2 months. I loaded up the truck Thursday night with all my usual supplies. Extra meat, cheese, tortillas, propane for the grill, drinks for the cooler. I always pack heavy for mountain festivals because you never know what you can get up there if you run out of something. The plan was to drive up Friday evening, set up Saturday morning, and work the weekend. Simple enough. I'd done dozens of these trips before. The drive started normal. I left around 6 in the evening, figured I'd get there by 10 or so and find a place to park for the night. The GPS route took me through some mountain passes I'd never seen before, but that's not unusual in West Virginia. There's always another back road you haven't been on yet. The festival cordons. 8s seemed legit when I plugged them in, and the route looked pretty direct once you got into the mountains. About 2 hours in, I stopped for gas at this little station that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1980s. The attendant was this older guy, maybe in his 60s, and when he saw me filling up the truck, he came over and asked where I was headed. I told him about the festival, showed him the location on my phone. His whole expression changed. He looked at me for a long moment, then said, "You sure about going up there? That road gets strange at night." I laughed it off. I mean, what did that even mean? Strange how? Like potholes? I've driven worse roads than anything up there. The truck's got good suspension, and I've taken it on some pretty rough mountain roads before. But he just shook his head and said, "Not potholes, kid. Just be careful what you follow." Then he went back inside without another word. I thought it was just typical mountain folk being weird about outsiders or something. To be fair, I get that kind of reaction sometimes when I roll up in a bright yellow taco truck. The road started normal enough once I got back on track. 2 lanes, decent asphalt, the usual mountain curves. But after about another hour, it started getting narrower. That's when I began seeing the festival signs. But they looked hand-painted and old, not the kind of professional signage you'd expect from an event promising thousands of attendees. Still, they were pointing in the right direction according to my GPS, so I kept following them. That's when things started getting weird. It happened all at once, like someone flipped a switch. The forest went completely silent. No insects, no wind, no birds. Nothing. Even my truck engine sounded muffled somehow. It was like someone turned off all the sound in the world except my heartbeat, which I could suddenly hear way too clearly. The air coming through my vents started smelling wrong too. At first I thought maybe there was a dead animal on the road or something, but it wasn't just decay. It was like spoiled meat mixed with propane and something sweet, almost like cotton candy, but rotten. I tried switching the air to recirculate, but the smell just got stronger. Then my radio started acting up. I lost all the stations I'd been listening to, just static on everything. But then it locked onto one signal that was playing ice cream truck music. You know that tinkling melody they all play? That was it, just playing on endless loop. I tried changing stations, but it kept coming back to the same music no matter what I did. My refrigeration units in the back of the truck started working harder too. The compressors that keep all the meat and cheese cold were running constantly, like it was 100 degrees outside instead of the cool mountain evening it actually was. I could hear them cycling on and off way more than normal. The GPS was showing that I was still moving toward my destination, but the arrival time kept getting later instead of earlier. When I first got in the mountains, it said I'd arrive at 10:15. Now it was showing 11:30, then 11:45. And it kept climbing even though I was maintaining the same speed. I kept checking my phone for the time, and that was another weird thing. No signal bars, but it somehow still showed I had full service. That's when I noticed the other food trucks in my rearview mirror. They were following me in a single file line, maybe 50 yards back. An ice cream truck, a hot dog cart on wheels, what looked like a pretzel stand. Each one was playing its own food vendor music. The ice cream truck had its melody. The hot dog cart was playing some polka tune. The pretzel stand had this carnival-style music. All of it was just a little too loud and a little too fast. The temperature outside dropped about 20 degrees in the span of maybe 10 minutes. I could feel it when I stuck my hand out the window, but the truck's thermometer was still showing normal readings. My breath started fogging up inside the cab, which made no sense because the heater was working fine. I tried speeding up to get some distance from the other trucks, but they matched me perfectly. Like we were all connected somehow, moving at exactly the same speed no matter how I adjusted the gas pedal. When I slowed down, they slowed down. When I sped up, they did too. It was like we were all parts of the same convoy, which I definitely didn't remember agreeing to join. Looking closer at the other trucks in my mirrors, I could see the vendors inside. They all had pale, waxy skin and these smiles that were way too wide. Each one was waving at me with movements that seemed slightly too fast and jerky, like someone was playing a video at the wrong speed. Their smiles never changed, not once. Even when they turned their heads to wave, the smile stayed exactly the same. Then I heard my own voice coming through the food truck speakers. "Fresh tacos. Come and get them." it said in this perfectly enthusiastic tone. But I never made that recording. I don't even have speakers set up to play outside the truck. It was definitely my voice, though, saying exactly what I'd normally say to attract customers. But I was still sitting in the driver's seat and my mouth wasn't moving. More trucks joined our little convoy as we kept driving. A pizza truck, a burger van, one of those funnel cake trailers, all with the same wrong-looking vendors inside, all playing their own food music, all maintaining that exact same speed and distance. The CB radio in my truck, which I hardly ever use, suddenly crackled to life. "Welcome to the Eternal Festival, Jamie. Take your position." The voice on the radio was mine. My own voice, but speaking with this formal, business-like tone that I'd never use, like I was reading from a script or something. The lead food truck, which I think was the ice cream one, started signaling for me to follow it down a side road. There was a wooden sign that said Festival Grounds with an arrow pointing down what looked like a dirt path. Every instinct I had was telling me to keep driving straight, but I was surrounded by these trucks on all sides now. Where could I go? The festival area looked perfect when we got there. Too perfect. Vendor spaces laid out in neat rows, electrical hookups, water spigots, even trash cans positioned exactly where you'd want them. But there were no customers anywhere. No cars in a parking area, no people walking around, no other signs of life. Just empty spaces waiting for food trucks. The vendors from the other trucks started getting out and setting up their stations. They moved with robotic precision, arranging items in exactly the same patterns. Condiments in the same spots, napkin dispensers at identical angles, menu boards positioned at the same height. They all moved like they were one person controlling multiple bodies. I stayed in my truck cab, watching through the windshield. The vendor that looked like me approached my truck and started tapping on the window with a metal spatula. She had my face, my hair, even the Taco Queen apron I always wear. But her eyes were completely empty, like looking at a mannequin. "Time to set up shop," she said through the window. "The customers will be here soon. They're always here." She pointed to the empty festival grounds with her spatula. "Can't you see them? They've been waiting so long for fresh food." I looked where she was pointing, but all I saw were empty picnic tables and bare ground. "I'm not opening today," I called back. "I don't feel well. I think I should head back." All the vendors stopped what they were doing and turned to stare at my truck in perfect unison. The Jamie vendor's smile finally faded. "The festival must have fresh food," she said. The customers demanded. The other vendors started surrounding my truck, each one carrying their cooking tools like weapons. Spatulas, tongs, ice cream scoops, pretzel forks. They were all staring at me with those empty eyes, and I realized they weren't just copying me. They were trying to replace me completely. I gunned the engine and crashed straight through their setup, sending tables and equipment flying. In my rearview mirror, I could see them just continuing to set up the festival as if nothing had happened, arranging everything back into those perfect patterns. I drove frantically back toward what I hoped was the main road, following my tire tracks in reverse. The convoy of food trucks didn't follow me this time. When I finally reached the highway, it was dawn, and my GPS was suddenly showing the normal route to what turned out to be a completely different festival location about 50 miles away. I arrived at the real festival around 8 in the morning. The other vendors there mentioned they were glad I made it, that they'd been worried when I didn't show up the day before. According to them, the festival had been going on since Friday, and Saturday was already half over. But according to my phone and my truck's clock, I'd only been driving for one night. I worked that festival for the rest of the weekend, but I couldn't concentrate. Every time I heard music from the carnival rides, I'd break out in a cold sweat. Every time another food vendor called out to customers, I'd freeze up thinking it was my own voice. I sold the truck within a week of getting back home. Now I work in an office building doing data entry. It's boring as hell, but at least I don't have to drive mountain roads alone at night anymore. I still hear ice cream truck music sometimes when I'm walking around town. Makes me break out in cold sweats every single time. Looking back now, I don't think there ever was a Serpent's Gap Mountain Festival. At least, not the kind with real people as customers. I never could find any mention of it online afterward, no matter how hard I searched. But somewhere up in those West Virginia mountains, I think there's still a festival going on. And if you're ever driving alone at night and you see a convoy of food trucks following you, whatever you do, don't take your position. I'm 25 and I drive for Uber on weekends to save up for graduate school. Psychology program, if you're wondering. I'm pretty good at reading people. Comes with the territory when you're picking up strangers all night. But this one night back in October, everything I thought I knew about people went right out the window. I'd been driving for about 6 months at that point, mostly around the college area and downtown. Good money, decent tips, and honestly, I enjoyed the conversations. You meet all kinds of people doing rideshare, students heading to parties, older folks going to the airport, workers getting off late shifts. I thought I'd seen it all. This particular Saturday night started normal enough. Had a few rides, made decent money, was thinking about calling it quits around midnight. That's when I got the ping for a pickup way out on Mountain View Road. I knew the area. It's where the city starts turning into actual mountains. Not exactly prime Uber territory, but the app was offering surge pricing, so I figured why not. The address took me about 20 minutes to reach, and honestly, I almost turned around twice. The road kept getting narrower and more winding. My GPS kept recalculating, like it wasn't sure where it was taking me. Finally pulled up to this little house that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1970s. Porch light was on, but the rest of the place was dark. I was sitting there for maybe 2 minutes when this elderly woman came out. She was wearing what looked like a dress from the 1950s, long sleeves, buttoned up to her neck, the whole thing. Kind of formal for a Saturday night, but hey, different generations dress different ways. She opened the back door and slid in before I could even get out to help her. "Evening, dear," she said, and her voice had this old-fashioned accent I couldn't quite place. "Thank you so much for coming all this way." "No problem," I said, turning around to look at her. "Where are we headed tonight?" She smiled. Really warm, grandmotherly type smile. "Oh, just up the mountain a ways. Family reunion. The family's been waiting such a long time for me." She paused, then added, "I'll give you directions as we go. And there's an extra $200 in it for you if you don't mind taking the scenic route." $200. That was my rent money right there, and I was already behind for the month. Should have been a red flag, honestly. Who carries that kind of cash around? But I was 25 and broke and stupid, so I just nodded and said, "Yes, ma'am, whatever you need." "Take the old road, dear," she said as I pulled away from the house. "It's so much prettier than the highway." I tried making small talk as we drove, asked about the family reunion, how many people would be there, that sort of thing. She just smiled and said, "Getting bigger every year." When I asked if it was her side of the family or her husband's, she got this distant look and said, "Oh, we're all family up here, one way or another." The woman knew every turn before I did. She'd say, "Left at the next bend," or "right after the old oak tree." And sure enough, there would be exactly what she described. Problem was, my GPS wasn't showing any of these roads. According to my phone, we were driving through completely blank areas. About 15 minutes in, I noticed she was humming. Just this soft, low tune I'd never heard before. Nothing particularly creepy about it, but for some reason it made my teeth ache. I kept adjusting my jaw, trying to make it stop, but the longer she hummed, the worse it got. That's when I realized my air conditioning had stopped working. I reached over to fiddle with it, but all the buttons felt dead. The windows were starting to fog up too, which was weird because it was a clear night. No, it humid at all. "Everything okay, dear?" the woman asked. "Yeah, just some car trouble," I said, wiping the windshield with my sleeve. When I glanced in the rearview mirror to check on her, I nearly drove off the road. The back seat looked empty. I could hear her breathing, could hear her humming, could smell this faint perfume like flowers that had been pressed in an old book. But the mirror showed nothing except empty leather seats. I blinked hard, shook my head, looked again. Still nothing. "You seem troubled," she said, and I jumped because her voice was right there, right behind my left shoulder. "Just tired," I managed to say. My hands were starting to shake on the steering wheel. The radio had been playing country music when we started, but now it was just static. I tried changing stations, but they were all the same. White noise with what sounded like whispering underneath. I turned it off. "Almost there," the woman said cheerfully. "Just around this next curve." My phone GPS still showed us driving through nothing. No roads, no landmarks, just a blank spot on the map. The speedometer said I was doing 45, but I had barely any pressure on the gas pedal. The car was moving on its own somehow. It was getting cold too. I could see my breath in the dome light. October in North Carolina isn't that cold, especially not in the car with the heater on. But the temperature just kept dropping. "There's the old homestead," the woman said, pointing ahead. "Park with the other cars, dear." I looked where she was pointing, and my blood turned to ice. There were dozens of cars lined up in this clearing, vehicles from every decade. I saw a 1940s pickup truck, some muscle cars from the 60s and 70s, a few 80s sedans, even some newer models like mine. They were all perfectly maintained, like they'd just rolled off the lot. And in every single car, someone was sitting behind the steering wheel, just sitting there, staring straight ahead. "Are those people okay?" I asked. The woman laughed, this light, tinkling sound. "They're perfect now, just like you'll be." I parlors, Ked where she indicated, hands shaking so bad I could barely put the car in park. The woman got out, but I stayed frozen in my seat, staring at all those other drivers. One by one, they turned to look at me. Their eyes were completely empty. Not vacant, empty. Like there was nothing behind them at all. The man in the pickup truck closest to me opened his mouth like he wanted to say something, but no sound came out. Just this silent, desperate expression. "Sam," the woman called from outside my car. Except I'd never told her my name. "Come meet the family." I turned to look at her, and she was standing by this huge old house that I swear hadn't been there a minute ago. The edges of it kept shifting, like I couldn't quite focus on it properly. She was still wearing that old-fashioned dress, but now she had my Uber jacket on over it, the one I'd left hanging in the front seat. "We've been waiting for someone just like you," she said. "Young, energetic, full of purpose. Every family needs fresh blood." The other drivers were getting out of their cars now, all moving in perfect synchronization. Same pace, same mechanical gait, same empty expressions. They formed a circle around my car, still not saying anything. I tried my door handle. Nothing. Pressed the unlock button on my key fob. Nothing. It was like the car wasn't mine anymore. "Hey," I called out to the other drivers through my window. "We can leave together. There's enough of us." They all spoke at the same time in their own voices, but saying the exact same words. "Leave? But we just got here. The family needs us." The synchronized speaking was the thing that finally snapped me out of my shock. I started pounding on the windows, kicking at the doors, anything to get out. The drivers just watched, with those horrible empty eyes. "The car will open when you're ready to join us properly," the woman said. She was close, or now standing right next to my window. Up close I could see that her skin had this waxy quality, like it wasn't quite real. That's when I noticed the back doors weren't locked, just the front ones. I scrambled over the center console and tumbled out the back door, hitting the ground hard. Before the drivers could react, I was running toward the tree line. "You can't leave, dear," the woman called after me. "You accepted the ride. The contract is binding." "I never signed anything," I shouted back, crashing through the underbrush. "This is kidnapping." I reached the edge of the clearing and slammed into something I couldn't see. It was like running into a wall made of thick glass. I could see the forest right there, could touch the trees, but I couldn't move forward. I tried different spots along the tree line, but it was the same everywhere. Some kind of invisible barrier keeping me trapped in the clearing. The drivers were walking toward me now, still in that creepy formation. The woman was behind them, smiling like a proud grandmother. "Every family needs to grow," she said, "and you'll make such a lovely addition." I was starting to panic, running along the barrier, looking for any way out. That's when I spotted it, a narrow hiking trail that started just outside the clearing. The barrier didn't seem to extend to the actual trail. I sprinted for it, pushing past branches and jumping over fallen logs. Behind me, I could hear the woman calling my name, but her voice was getting fainter. The trail was steep and rocky, but I didn't stop running until I reached the main road about 3 hours later. A trucker picked me up just as the sun was coming up, and I was so relieved to see another normal human being that I almost cried. The police went back to investigate, but they said they couldn't find anything, just an empty lot with some old foundation stones. My car turned up back at the original pickup address, keys in the ignition, gas tank full. The woman's information wasn't in my Uber history. According to the app, I'd never had a passenger that night, at all. I quit driving for Uber the next day. Work retail now at a clothing store downtown. Same customers, same routine, same normal people every day. I know exactly who they are and where they're going. I still drive past that area sometimes. Can't help myself. The road where I picked her up is always empty now. House looks abandoned. But sometimes, late at night when I'm driving home from work, I'll catch a glimpse of headlights in my rearview mirror that seem to be following the same route I took that night. I never pick up hitchhikers anymore, and I damn sure never take jobs that seem too good to be true. Looking back, I think that woman had been collecting drivers for a long time. All those cars from different decades. That wasn't just for show. And I think if I hadn't found that trail, I'd still be sitting behind my steering wheel in that clearing, staring straight ahead with empty eyes, waiting for the next person to join the family. $200 seemed like easy money at the time, but nothing's ever that easy, especially not up in those mountains. Some families don't care if you want to join them or not.